Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
All right, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Accounting Arc. Today it's just Byron and me, and there was an article that I had shared called "How the Science of Stoicism Can Boost Your Well-Being." And with everything that's been going on in our country, and then also with the idea that busy season's going to be coming up well, I hate to say in a few because I don't want anyone getting like trauma from that.
Don't panic.
We've got a bunch of months, but in preparation for that, so that you can start to practice perhaps some of these things to keep your well-being going when you get there. We thought it'd be good because this article also resonated with Byron.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, Stoicism, if you're not familiar with it, and the way I always thought of it as well, right? We kind of learned this as part of philosophy and history, is these were the people that were, I mean, I just think of them as the almost unfeeling, right? That whole concept of
Right.
being stoic is you're unfeeling, you're but resilient. Think of it as just a person being almost like a stone, kind of a sense. And what the article did was it went into sort of this concept of modern Stoicism, which I found interesting. And uh, it says, for example, that people with and what happened. This is coming from Psychology Today. We'll put the link in the show notes. These scientists did a study, and they found that the higher scores with Stoicism, or this modern Stoicism, are linked with greater resilience, meaning you can get through whatever things are happening around you without being traumatized. They also said lower anger and then overall higher life satisfaction. So I think you start to hear the whole well-being and health, mental health in particular, I think coming into play here.
Yeah, I think if you weren't a student of Stoicism before and you hear just those bullet points, that makes it very enticing and interesting to dive in. I kind of stumbled upon Stoicism a couple years ago, because I started the book Discipline is Destiny from Ryan Holiday, at a moment when I wasn't necessarily looking for philosophy or even Stoicism. Frankly, I really thought Stoicism was just like having no emotion or feelings because of the way people refer to you as a Stoic if you're kind of emotionless. But I grabbed that book just because I was in a time, a headspace where I was thinking like, I could really like use some muscling up of my discipline, like my daily like get shit done kind of philosophy. And I jumped into that and discovered this whole world of Stoicism. And to the article's point, that point of you know creating, I guess, some understanding of the world to help you to navigate some of these like challenging times has been something that I'm so grateful that I did stumble onto Stoicism, because I've been leaning on it a bunch these last year or so, given just kind of the um, turbulent environment that we live in these days.
Definitely, definitely. And I feel that too. And I think as accountants, we also often get criticized, because I feel like it is a criticism that we're too stoic because we're
Right.
unfeeling and we're just looking at the numbers and we're doing all these things. And we all know that we are way that's definitely not us. That might be the face we sometimes put forward because we have to be sometimes the reasonable and objective one in the room. But I think as we go through, so the way Byron and I are thinking we're going to do this is we're going to go through this scale that was developed called the Stoic Attitudes and Behaviors Scale. And actually, it's funny because when I read it, it's SABS, and I keep wanting to say SASB, but that's not SASB. But so this SABS scale, I guess, is what it would be. We're gonna go through each of these things and just kind of share a little bit about what it really means and how we see it playing out, especially for us as accountants. I encourage you to do the same. So maybe what I'm thinking I'll do, I'll read one at a time and we'll kind of reflect and react on it. So,
Sounds
first
good.
one here is beliefs about control, and that is recognizing that while we cannot control events, other people, or the past, our attitude, considered thoughts, and voluntary behaviors are up to us. Basically, and I come back to mind, that brought me back to mindfulness. We can't control what's happening, but we can control how we react to what's happening.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And not only how we react to what's happening, but when we are trying to navigate a situation, recognizing and acknowledging what aspects of it we have control over and what aspects we don't have control over. And that's, something in Stoic philosophy, a very simple example is the weather, right? There's sometimes you have plans to go outside and have an amazing day, and the weather has said no chance. It's going to be stormy and chilly and gross outside. And we have no control over that. So you can, sit in your house and be miserable and upset all day. And that is what you have control over, but you cannot control the weather. So it's important to acknowledge like what I can control and what is truly out of my control. And you just have to accept as the way it is.
Yeah. And in the client situation, I also tell my team to think about it that way too. Like a client may get upset, they may yell at us, whatever.
That's right.
We can't control that. And sometimes, yeah, you just got to bite your lip and take it. But we can control whether or not they're a client. And so that's one of the other things I always do is staff will come and
There you
complain to me
go.
about a client, sometimes legitimately so. And if I actually believe it's legitimate, my question back to them is, shall we fire them as a client? So if you've got that
Yep.
client that's the pain in your butt and you're like, "Oh, I can't deal with this person," you always have that option to, well, especially if you're the firm owner, to fire them, right? Or to at least
Yeah.
escalate that and be like, is this really a client we want to work with? Because nobody wants to work with them because they have such a bad attitude or they treat us so poorly. This is not revenue worth having.
Yeah, and a similar but different circumstance in a client or customer relationship is that client or customer who's not responsive. Like there's something that's very urgent on your mind that needs to be addressed, and they're not responsive to it. And I frequently share this advice to people is you cannot care more about somebody else's business than they care about it themselves. And if they're choosing to not prioritize something that you brought to their attention or, something important from your perspective and acknowledging it, you cannot control that. You can only bring it to email, their inbox, you can call them, you can bring it to their attention, but you cannot control whether or not they take action and care as much as you want them to.
And I actually extending that same thing when with advice, because that's the other one that comes up a
Yeah.
lot. I'm like, I am recommending against this, or here's our analysis. We think that this is probably the best path for you. And they make a decision, you're like, that's going to be a problem. And as long as you raise that, I'm like, I think that's going to be a problem, and here's why. They may still decide to do that. And then at that point, yeah, it's their problem. But it's
That's right.
also I feel like it's hey it's almost like kids, right? You can only prevent them from getting hurt so much. And sometimes you just got to be there to be
Yep.
like, okay, let's help get you back together and let's figure out what we're gonna do from this.
Yeah, no doubt. And one last thing I'll say on this is also in like a manager or supervisor type of role. One of the challenges, in fact, I was talking to somebody a few months ago about Stoic philosophy, and she had this question. She's like, sometimes in my role, like I feel like I'm just able to will shit to happen. Like I'm able to just like will it to happen, and like even though everybody's saying it won't happen, like I can make it happen. And how do I reconcile that with like my lack of control of these things? And what I mean, this was my take on it is, what you control is the instruction or communication to the team members of maybe how important something is, and what needs to be done in order to accomplish it. It is up to them whether or not they take the actions that they are being asked to take, if they put the time and priority in place. But this like willing things to happen is probably just you controlling the messaging and the information to those that need the boots on the ground to make it happen, because that's what you have control over. You don't have control over whether or not they actually do it.
That's an interesting one. I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah, it applies in so many different places. I think, the fact that this is number one is almost in my mind like really like from a priority perspective. It's probably one of the biggest and most important aspects of Stoic philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, number two, beliefs about happiness. This is understanding that true well-being depends on things that are up to us, including character and virtue, not on wealth or success.
This is a tough one. This is a tough one. That philosophy of having control. I mean, I feel like it leans a little bit on the one, having control over whether or not you are happy, despite these secondary or tertiary uh, influences on happiness.
Yeah, I feel like this one is very, very, very personal because it's pointing back towards character and virtue, which to me are individual interpretations. Who is someone of good character? I mean, how would you describe someone that's virtuous? And of course, we've got spirituality and religion that come in and help influence what we perceive these things to be. I
Yep.
think a lot of us talk about it not money not being the answer. And I think that's something we all hear, right? And especially as accountants, I think sometimes we can become a little overly focused on profitability. We definitely, and we see this in ESG reporting and all these other types of trends. We need to look at the bigger picture. The one of this that I really struggled with was the success, not focusing on a success
Mm.
equaling happiness. That one I was like, oh, and I have a high fear of failure. I know a lot of us in this profession have a high fear of failure. So I think that also ties into this. Are we actually happy? Can we be happy if we're not successful? I struggled with that one.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And, I think the other aspects of this belief about happiness also relates to uh, being happy with things that happen to you, regardless of what those are. And it's this is probably one of the most challenging ones because the original Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, they would talk about like if bad things happen to you, still being happy that like you're given this opportunity to resolve it or address it or take it on, even if it has happened to you. And I think this is a really difficult component of Stoic philosophy that, I mean, I think it has a lot of benefits if you can really work on that. But it can be challenging because, to your point, I think we all set goals for ourselves, and not achieving those goals is it's kind of tough to maintain your happiness if you fall short on that.
But building off of what you said, so I also subscribe to the everything happens for a reason. So
Right.
I might be striving to do something, or I wanted this particular job or project, and then when we don't get it, I do take it very like hard. But then I always have to remind myself, okay, that happened for a reason. And this is maybe taking us into the next one, which is Stoic mindfulness. But I have found generally, I'm going to say at least 90% of the time, that I was like, oh, something else happened. I'm like, oh, that's why that we didn't get that, or that's why that didn't
That's
come
right.
true because there was this other thing, and I wouldn't be able to do this other thing if that had happened. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah, you're so on point there. Just of being aware of the other opportunities that get created.
Okay, tied. This is the one I think that's tied to a little bit is Stoic mindfulness. So paying close attention to our judgments and habits of thought and using practices like daily reflection to catch unhelpful patterns. So the reason I tied that together was when I something doesn't happen, there's this tendency to go, I wasn't good enough, our proposal wasn't good enough. Uh, we screwed something up, and so that's why they didn't choose us, or this thing didn't happen. And that's where in my head, I had to flip it in my head and go, it's not me, or I'm not the right fit for some reason. But it's not me personally that is not a good person or not skilled or whatever it is, the judgment I'm kind of thinking of. So I needed to take that away from the personal and taking it upon myself to just be situational.
Yeah, and this is the kind of scenario where you need to almost have an out of body conversation with yourself. When you're talking bad about yourself or really beating yourself up for something, and this is where you have to like stay pause. If I was like listening to Donnie share these things that I'm thinking, what advice would I give him as a secondary person? And I need to take that advice for myself. Because usually we're supportive of our friends and family members, but not as supportive of our own selves. And the Stoic mindfulness is about being aware of that like a negative self-talk and being supportive of ourselves like we would be for friends and family.
Yeah. And I think tied to mindfulness just in general. I mean, that's part of that whole practice of meditation. A lot of people think that meditation is just about completely clearing your mind. And if you're doing Zen meditation, that technically is the objective of that. But regular meditation, which is what most of us are actually doing, it's really looking at these thoughts that are coming in and really looking at them and especially if they're negative, not holding on to them and letting them pass through and go, okay, that's not useful for me. That's not going to help me move forward.
That's right.
What really is going on here? And I do this a lot because I get internalized, I think, anxiety. I said the wrong thing, or this
Yep.
is happening and someone doesn't like me, or this is that. I catch myself doing a lot of that. And that's where it's that mindfulness, that stopping and going, okay, I see what I'm doing. I'm overly internalizing. I'm overly internally analyzing it. I need to stop that and take a step back, like Byron was saying, and really look at the situation objectively and go, okay, wait, what's happening? And then also recognizing that's not something I can control. So maybe I just need to let it go
That's
and
it.
move on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, you beat me to it. That's exactly what I was going to say. And you said something I th think that's also really important of recognizing that it's not productive. Having like chewing on that conversation over and over and over or that situation and just like at some point like it's okay. You're going to have those thoughts, you're going to think about those things, but eventually you have to say, all right, I've thought about it enough. It's time to figure out what I can control and move forward on that.
Right. Well, we've tied them all together so far. Let's check number four. Number four is virtue. So putting
Ooh.
wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control into practice. That's interesting. That's not what I would have thought virtue meant.
Yeah, and I feel like this should almost be number seven because I do feel like this is just it's almost like tying all of these practices together and saying like don't just talk about it, actually do this stuff.
Oh, I like that. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, right. Because you're right. The end in there is putting it into practice. So it's actually applying rather than just talking about it per se.
Yeah, yeah, and the wisdom is building on kind of the lessons that we've learned from the experiences that we've had in the past. The courage is about having those tough conversations or taking that action that might be scary. And justice is really interesting. I'm actually rereading for I think the third time now, Ryan Holiday's Right Thing Right Now, which is about the virtue of justice. And it's really interesting because justice is kind of similar to what you were talking about earlier around like virtue. It's really personal to what you consider to be justice. And so, it's important to like spend some time to understand, to know what justice means to you in order to bring that into practice. And gosh, self-control has been, bullets one, two, and three so far.
I think in accounting that we too often forget that we have to put our own mask on first, like in an airplane, right? Put our own mask on first before we help others. And our whole thing is, oh, there's clients, I got to help the clients, I got to do all this stuff. And we're giving so much of ourselves that we're not taking that time to take care of ourselves. It's part of the reason why at the center we created this whole personal resilience program, which is really, for you to be that strong rock and foundation for the clients, you need to be solid yourself first. So it really is a matter of taking care of ourselves, and then we can take care of others. In fact, we can take care of more others the stronger that we are as a foundation. And that's also why a lot of what we do is based in teams, because then even if you're faltering, some of the teammates can jump in to cover or to allow you the time to rest so that you can rest, but we're still holding everybody up. So that's why I think working together in a team is so important, as well as taking care of yourself.
Completely. The wisdom, I think, is an interesting one to call out too, because that's, everyone especially with the evident of AI right now, knowledge has become a lot more accessible. So I also think of it as just a step above information. I can get information really easily,
Yep.
which most of us equate to the knowledge piece. But it's that wisdom that it doesn't actually have and can apply, which is why we talk about AI, I'm always like, yeah, get the information from it, but then you have to
Right.
apply your own experience and your own expertise onto that to really determine how you're going to put it into action.
Yeah, so well said. It's not wisdom, and you can't even people might give you advice based on their personal wisdom, but that is still not your own wisdom. Wisdom is about those personal experiences.
Mhm. All right, let's move on to the number five is
Ooh.
benevolence and compassion. So recognizing our shared humanity and extending kindness and care.
Yeah, I feel like we just did a whole episode almost around this bullet here.
Yeah, and one of the other articles I read, which we'll also throw in here, or actually, sorry, it was a video that was talking about the impacts of AI on the different types of workers. And there were three types of workers that it mentioned. Um, Effectively, the doers, the thinkers, and the carers. And so doers obviously are the ones that
Ooh,
are physically doing stuff. The thinkers, we as accountants were grouped in there with the doctors and the lawyers and the others. Basically,
sure.
our whole job is about helping people think through things. And then the carers, it said more like healthcare people, right? The job is truly to give that care. And part of my reaction to that was like, wait a minute, in accounting, we actually do all three. We have to do the accounting. We have to apply judgment and critical thinking to help people work through problems, or
Yep.
thinking also through risk assessment to understand what are the risks, can I mitigate them? And then I think a lot of people don't recognize that our profession is very much about caring, especially if you're working with families or small businesses. It's about really making sure everything is happening right, that they have good financial health, that they have good financial well-being, and increasingly, as we've talked through this, it's about the bigger picture of well-being. Because often too, especially in small businesses, HR reports to the controller, or the controller is
Yep.
almost a de facto HR person as well. And so we're having to take care of all these human aspects of things.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that they didn't include the word empathy in this bullet, because to me that's a lot of what this is, right? Of having um, empathy for others, and like it, that's compassion, like understanding it, like you said, from an accounting perspective, you may have a situation where you have to deliver maybe some not so great news. So understanding, like, you know, you can't just treat it as just this transactional thing. Like if you're helping people with like maybe a business that they've created and now they're having financial challenges, or maybe a big tax bill, and you just send that email, just stroke a check for $250,000 to the feds. And it's like having some awareness that, hey, this is like real money, real people, and real situations that you need to be aware of in this shared humanity that we have. You can approach it with kindness and care.
Yeah, and that makes me think actually of a situation that I dealt with when I was doing IT audit, where I was going in as actually to a government agency, and I was interviewing the director of IT there. And the poor guy, I mean, being government, he didn't have a ton of budget. He was trying to fight for these things. And I was going in, I'm asking my questions, and I'm not, of course, not getting the question, not getting the answers I'm expecting. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to write that up. I'm gonna have to write that up in my head. I'm not telling him, but in my head, I'm going, oh my gosh, there's all these
Yeah.
issues I'm gonna have to write up because there's control deficiencies. And you would think in an audit, your whole thing is, well, you're not doing it right, and you're not doing that, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing this. But the guy was almost on the, well, actually, I think he did actually break down and start crying. And I really had to be there. This wasn't necessarily a go hug him situation, but it was
Yeah.
I had to be like, well, this is what I can actually do. I do think these things are problems. I'm gonna write them up like they're serious problems. I don't know if
Yeah.
my manager's gonna let me put them through as that serious, but I'm gonna try. If I write these up and they get into my audit report, management's gonna have to help you fix this. They're gonna have to give you the money to fix this stuff because I'm gonna have to come back next year and be like, did you do anything? And if you didn't, it's gonna be a worse problem. And
Right.
just giving him some of that hope that like someone understood his situation, someone could actually potentially help him. And this is me as like, oh, this is what I think my second year. So I was probably 22 or 23 with this 50 something year old man like coming in as his auditor. But just that care and showing that compassion for his situation, I think totally helped him. I mean, you saw his posture and everything visibly changed by the time we were done.
That's such a great example. And I can imagine not exactly the same, but very similar situations when I was a young auditor, like doing the checklist, right? And asking the questions to executive directors of nonprofits where, they have a mission, like they're trying to achieve something, and I'm there like scrutinizing all these things that like oftentimes they wouldn't even understand. And this feeling of like that they would have, that they are failing to do what they're supposed to do, that they aren't even aware of, or those things, like having that awareness. And in your situation, like being able to say, this isn't, I'm not writing this as a reflection of your failures. I'm writing this as a reflection of the failure of resources to be provided to you in order to address these things.
Yeah. Which goes back up to our this is something that's not in your control, and
There you
it's not a
go.
reflection of yourself. Our number one and number two.
So good. So many of these things tie together. I think that's what I just love about Stoic philosophy is, once you kind of understand the puzzle pieces, you can't have just one without the other oftentimes.
Totally agree. All right, number six is ethical development, always near and dear to our hearts as accountants. So seeing life as a lifelong journey of growth and self-improvement. Okay, that was not what I was expecting to hear from ethics.
Yeah, that's an interesting definition for sure. I mean, what jumps out for me there is the self-improvement, which I think is kind of like a ethical obligation to yourself to always be like looking for opportunities to improve with like who you are as a human, not necessarily improve your lacrosse game or your soccer game or improve your 10 key skills. It's really about like self-improvement of who you are as a kind human.
That's with that, I would tie that back to that virtue one where
Yeah.
they talked about courage and justice, like
Yes.
supporting what you are standing up for what you think is right. And as Byron said, it's very individual. I mean, we clearly see that in with everything that's going on. People have different ideas of what is right in there, and we're seeing people all over starting to have even more courage to stand up for what they think is right or not. That's definitely becoming clear.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And now that I reread that, it is ethical development. So I guess the development is really the core message there in the sense that this is a journey in life, and we always have the ability to, fix things that we want to improve or fix things that we have control over. So recognizing that it is a journey, and we're just not like just because. Maybe you are unhappy today. You can't do something about that to fix it throughout your journey in life.
I also kind of think of it as the the way that we view what is moral or ethical evolves as we get older. I can
Very much
definitely
so.
see where I am today. Maybe this ties to your wisdom point as well. What I'm kind of seeing is that is very different from what the way I felt viewed it in high school, even compared to college, even maybe even compared to a little after college.
Without a doubt. Absolutely. I would almost I don't know if I'd be scared or fascinated to like be able to actually put that in an outline side by side to compare at these like different like decades or chapters of our lives. But yeah, without a doubt. I would say, in my 40s, I'm very different than I was in my 20s, in many respects.
All right, and number seven, rounding this out, is a Stoic worldview. So placing our lives in a bigger picture, which can bring perspective, acceptance, and gratitude.
Yes. Maybe there is a reason why this is the last one, and not virtue, because this I think really is about that idea of looking beyond us with that perspective of Stoic philosophy. I've definitely noticed since beginning to learn about Stoic philosophy, my worldview has changed significantly in how I maybe judge other people's actions or appreciate other people's actions and give gratitude. Definitely something that I try to do more frequently than ever these days. So I really like this idea of just like how you're kind of applying Stoic philosophy to the world around you.
And this one also, from an accounting standpoint, resonated with me because I feel like that's often our job is to take that step back and look at whether
Yeah.
it's the business as a whole, or the business's role, or I say organization because it could be a nonprofit, could be government, the organization's role within the community, within the world, like what really is the impact that we're having, not just on ourselves, but the community that, particularly the community that we're working in. And as you and I have learned a lot getting involved at the national level, or being involved at the national level for almost, I'm going to say it, almost 2 decades now. That definitely opened my eyes to the bigger picture of, whoa, there's national level stuff, there's international level stuff, and how all this starts to fit together. That's often the discussions I'm having also with people about what's happening in the world today. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're looking at it, but you're looking at it from your personal in your state view. But this is kind of what's happening internationally in the dynamics now that I've learned that.
Oh man, you are so spot on. I remember, early in my career when I got involved at the national level, it was all very much with like AICPA and that community. And then the first time I went to a non-CPA accounting conference, where there was other accountants who are non-CPAs in that world. It really was like an unveiling because all of a sudden I had more perspective on, what is going on around the world and what is happening through the lenses of these different perspectives. And it was a pretty eye-opening moment to realize because up to that point I had a very small window into the larger world of accounting, that was missing, which obviously influenced the way I thought things, what was important, what wasn't important, and the decisions that were or were not being made.
Yeah, and that ties back to the whole concept of unconscious bias. Right.
Sure.
It's those ones that we have just because of our experiences and where we all of a sudden making assumptions, where having this greater diversity of perspective and exposure can help us to really broaden that worldview. And even if we may not agree with a lot of what other people are saying, at least we understand where they're coming from and why they might feel a certain way about something.
That's such a really good point. I actually had a conversation just a couple weeks ago with a friend who was really kind of lamenting on the way, our political climate is right now. And one of the things I shared with him is, I mean, you've been to the farm, you know where I live. I'm a very agricultural farm world that I live in, which means a lot of my neighbors are not the people at accounting conferences, are not, in, these metro areas, busy areas. And it gives me a lot of perspective of their view of the world. And it's really, it's not what the media wants you to believe their view of the world is. It's really eye-opening and helpful for me because these are my neighbors. I talk to them. I may not agree with their views or perspectives, but I also recognize that their views and perspectives are from somebody who doesn't travel all the time, doesn't go into metro areas, doesn't see a lot of the other challenges of the world. What they see is their crops, trying to, grow their crops and sell their crops and those types of things. So, this worldview and acknowledging your maybe lack of perspective is really important because it can have some significant influence on the way you see the world.
Right. Well, we're almost at time, and that was the
Ooh.
seven. So we did good, Byron. I think we got through all of that here. So for those of you again that have always thought about Stoicism as this rigid person, unfeeling person, hopefully we've dispelled some of those myths through this. And I think we did a good job of also explaining how you're seeing what we do as accountants really apply to this. So definitely encourage a lot of people to take a look at it. We'll have the link in the show notes. Closing thoughts, Byron?
I would just say this is one of those things where I've said it many times. I wish I had discovered this in my 20s. We talked about, how my worldview is very different now than it was in my 20s. And, I think digging in a little bit to Stoic philosophy in my 20s probably would have led me to gain much more wisdom earlier on in my journey through life. So, if any of this does pique your interest, jump in. There's so many resources available today to learn more, and this article I think is a really good way to get your toes wet.
We'll call that a wrap. So thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.